Hello everyone. In this session, we will learn about Postman and how to test API manually using Postman. So to download Postman, just type Postman, open the download Postman website, then based on your version or operating system, choose to download. It will take some time based on your internet connection. So till the time is download is happening. If you want to learn more about Postman or want to see Postman, earlier Postman was using Chrome extension, but now it is no longer in use. It has been deprecated. So now Postman only provides a desktop application. So once the download is done, let's see if download is done. It's almost done. Okay, now just install it. Again, it will take some time. Okay, so I think it's almost done. Yeah. So once you download and install application or install Postman, it will look like this. I was already logged in earlier. That's why you see all these collection pre-built in here. But if you're a new user, you will see completely new Postman UI without any of these collections. I'll talk about the features and the collections later. So first of all, this is in Launchpad. You can see they have some built-in tutorials on specific topics, but our goal is not that, right? So this is how a empty Postman looks like. Now, if we have to test our first API, we have to use this. So in my previous session, I talked about different kind of thing, right? This is method type, this is endpoint, parameters, authorization, status code, and so on. So this is called the Postman request editor. Here you can send and receive requests both as manually and automation through automation test also. So let's talk about this request editor first. So this is a method type, pretty clear. Endpoint is basically whichever API you want to test, you will provide the endpoint here. Parameters, we talked about parameters, like everything after the question mark parameters. So here you can provide parameters, key, and then value. Authorization, so there are different kind of authorizations supported in different website. Mostly authorization is not needed if it is a public website or a consumer specific website, but for the intranet website or internal website, the authorization may be needed. So these are all different kind of authentication. Bearer token is one such example where you get the token from your internal websites or in your company. You the developers can provide you the token, and then bearer token, using bearer token you can log in any API. Headers, we talked about headers in previous session, right? In theory. So here we provide all those things like content type. So if you type accept, so here all these kind of headers are already present, which is known to JSON or XML based API. So content type, and then you can here type application slash JSON, content type, again application slash JSON, and so on. Okay, and you can also use some custom API, let's say auth token in our case. So we can say auth token is something like this. So here we'll provide all those headers. Body, so in body we have different kind. Like for raw JSON data, we generally use this. And in that section, there are multiple options also. We generally use JSON and provide the payloads here. But it may be possible that the API can take data in form data format. So here we provide form data parameters. It also could be possible it provides data in encoded form format. So here we provide data in that. And sometimes you need an API file to provide that data where you can use. GraphQL is basically nowadays there's a new kind of API which can query data from database just like in SQL queries through APIs. So for that we can use that. Okay, this is query, and then if your database supports GraphQL, then you can get the response in response here. And these are variables like in databases we use select all from table where name is equal to this, so name is your variable. So pre-request script and test we using in automation. I'll tell you about more in automation session. And settings is basically you want to follow auto redirection, follow original HTTP request and so on. These are like by default is fine, but if sometimes you need something, you can do that, but otherwise by default setting is fine. So you can send your API request. Let's say, for example, I send a request to google.com. Right? If you preview the data, that's an error. Your client has verified illegal request. So I think we may not need this in our header. Okay, so Google, it doesn't support this kind of API using GET, right? So let's take my website. See, so we got the response status code here. We talked about status code, right? So status code is fine. This is time it took to, you can see the time in specific section also. So most of the time it takes in data transfer and data download. So that's why you see these two options. You can compare this with Chrome. I will tell you more about when we'll see the example. So here you can see the preview, right? So that's how you send an API request. You can also save all kind of these APIs if you want to save in collection and other things. We'll talk about collections in a while. Okay, so this is all about that. Request editor, this is our request editor. You can use or just add a new tab and create new request using this and so on. Now this was request editor. Now let's go to left section. Here you have history. So this is very important. All the APIs you hit through this request editor is available and visible in this history section. If you want to save responses, you can use this. Otherwise, you can disable this. I'll mostly use this. Now, you can also search all those APIs from history. So let's say I want to see where is one particular API which I hit like few days ago. I can just search and find it out. This is very pretty useful features. Okay, collection. Now comes the main part. So what you want to do is basically when you try to do a manual testing of APIs or even automation of APIs, let's say you have different system, like you have 4 system, or you have different website to test or different project to test. What you want to do is basically you don't want to mess up all these things in one or in the history section without any formatting or collection. Collection is basically you can group your particular APIs testing in one particular section, which is called collection. So it's kind of like a group. So let's say I'll create a new collection for this testing and name it as builder, because I'll show you we'll be using builder application to test APIs. I'll name is a builder APIs. Okay. Now again, I will show that these kind of test prerequisite variables in automation session. Mostly these are used in automation. but this can be used manually also. So I'll talk about variable in some time. So I created a collection. Where is the collection? Okay, I think this is yeah. So I created a builder API collection. Right now you don't see any API, right? So if you want, you can add any APIs in this using this dot option, and you have add request option here. So I can just add a request. Let's say request name login. See? Now you can also duplicate this, right? And I can name it invalid login, right? So collection are useful in terms of grouping. APIs, this is basically for developers. Sometimes developer wants to create a mock API, mock server or mock API request. They can do that using API. So if you want to know about that, I can do that, but mention that in user suggestion section. But this is mostly for developers, so I'm skipping that. So this section is covered. Now let's talk about the upper menu bar. These are simple. New is new, new tab, new tab. Postman window is Postman window. Postman runner. So collection runner, I'll talk about this. So I'll talk about this in when we have done the manual testing. So test talk Postman runner, collection runner, and variables later, right? So apart from that, import. Yeah, so this is important. So you can import any existing collection also if you want to, right? Let's say import and export. I'll show you. So let's say I export this. Okay, now I can import this collection. So basically you can import a, so you work on a collection given by developer, right? Developer has done the unit testing. Now it's your turn to do the integration testing. So you can reuse the unit testing test cases by just importing that particular collection. So I can just import it. Okay, so if it is, because it was already present, that's why this option. Otherwise you can just say save. So this is about import. So you can see all those APIs which were there earlier is present here. Okay, apart from that, nothing. Edit is pretty much simple. View is simple. So in view, so this is an important thing in view. So Postman console. Okay, so whenever you hit any API, so I hit the API. So let's say, where is our new collection which we created? Builder automation, builder API is this one, right? So let's say this is hitting my website. So when you hit that, so all the logs related to request and the response you can see here. See, so you can see about network details, you can see your request headers, you can see response headers. So in case you want to debug anything related to API, when you hit it or you don't know what is the error here, you can go ahead and see this, right? So console is very important in those terms. So we'll be using a lot of console in our API automation test cases. Also in request editor, you can see all the data related to response, like body is there, body header, response headers are there, but you can't see anything related to the request. So how the request is sent, what was the data in request, especially when we use the dynamic variables or programmatical conditions, then it is become very difficult to find out that if we are sending the correct data or not. So that's when this console becomes very important. So this is about console. Yeah, so this section is also done. I'll talk about workspaces in the workspaces session here, because obviously when you work on API automation and API test cases, you will be working as a team member, right? So there will be multiple members accessing that particular same collection which we create. Like in this case, this collection builder API collection may be tested by other users also, other testers also. So what we do is basically create a workspace and then share this workspace with them. They can work on, let's say, dashboard APIs, and I can work on login APIs, and then we can merge and fork request. I'll talk about this in version controlling, and the team workspace session. Invite is basically inviting someone in particular workspace. Sync is sync. So if you are logged in and logged in different system in your, let's say, office and your home system, and you want to sync uh, those requests between the system, you can use this. Proxy, I'll talk about proxy. So in using proxy, we can capture the data or API related request and then reuse it in our collections. Settings is simple. If you want to check, or themes is basically if you want to use dark theme, general if you want to change certain settings. So settings are simple. If you have any questions, let me know in the forum. Notification is simple. Favorite is simple. This is profile settings, pretty enough. And this is if you want to upgrade to a paid version. But we can do everything related to API test and API test automation in free version itself. So this is not needed. Okay, now this is tabs. So let's talk about variables now, where these environment file comes handy. So this is environment, right? So where does this environment helps you? So environment is nothing is but set of different variables. So let's say you are testing this builder website, and you have three environment, let's say staging, UAT, and production. So how will you manage that, right? So there are two options. Either you create three collection, one for staging, one for UAT, and one for production, or you can create a simple create three environment file, one staging, one UAT, and one production. And then based on your requirement, you can run those suit, just changing the environment file. The third option is having single environment file, and then you can just change the endpoint or base endpoint or base URL in that particular environment file, and then just then test it, the collection, automation collection or the manual test collection in different environments. So in those cases, environment file becomes handy. So I'll give you an example. Let's say add an environment file. I'll give the name as builder staging. Okay, and let's say I'll say the base URL is https staging dot engineer AI, right? And now I can select this environment from here. You can create as many as environment you want. There's no restriction on that. Now how to use these environment values here. So I'll talk about how to use these environment values in test and pre-step in automation, but manually anywhere in header or in body or in endpoint, you can use environment value like this, right? So if you see, our base URL is this, or I just put the value of base URL, right? If you see this value, and if you hover it, you can see the value. This is an environment variable. Initial value is this, current value is this. And now if I hit this API, you can see I got the result. right? So if you see the console, the get request was this. So now if I want to test it on production, I can simply just change the value here. And if I again hit it and see the console, you can notice this time the environment was engineer AI. So in these scenarios, these environment variables come handy. You can also add these variables in headers like this, and in body data, if you have, let's say, raw body data, you can add those variables like this. Okay. Now these variables can be accessed. So this is an environment variable, but you can also access collection related variable also. So if I say I can create a collection variable also. So this is my variable, collection variable, and I can say this is like say build card. So I'll talk about build card and other details later, but just say that this is a build card and the name is name. Now if I want to access the collection variable, I can also do that in a similar way. So build card, uh, see build card name, build card number is this. So I can access the build card values or any variable values, be it on environment variable, be it on collection variable, using this in body endpoint, sorry, in endpoint or body or in header. But in pre-request and test request, the process is different. Basically, it's if you want to get an environment value, you use like this, or set a value, so then you use like this. So this is basically part of automation. We'll talk about that in automation script, but that's how you use variables in manual request. So I think this is just the comment part, nothing else. Example, example is basically if you want to reuse some example or just create templates of some testing, you can add them an example and then use them in different requests. So this is about Postman. So for debugging purpose, you can use this developer console. Now let's take an example of real-time API, right? So I'll be using staging.engineer.ai. Okay, and now I'll log in and I'll capture the API request. And when you go in console, so manual tester who haven't seen this earlier, so you can capture any API request details through console, Chrome console. You can just inspect and go to network in Chrome developer tools, and here you can see all these API, right? So I did XHR, so I want to fetch the APIs only, not the JS file or images file. That's why it comes handy. Now if I do login, see login was successful. And let's see where is our API. I will yeah, So when I shorted it time, so I get the API which is taking a lot of time, and generally these APIs take time. So sign in is my API, right? So if you analyze this request, so you can see, so this is your request URL. We also call it endpoint. This is your request model. So just compare it with this Postman. This is your request URL, right? So what we can do, we can just copy paste this URL. Okay, so this is our API request test. And if you notice in this time, the method type is post. So I'll select the post method type. These are not needed, so I'm removing this. So let's see if we need any header. So if you see, these are response, we don't need this. So these are our request headers, and this is automatically supplied. So our main ones is basically referrer. Content type, application JSON, and referrer is this, right? Now let's go in body part. So we know that this is JSON, and we also know that this is the request payload or the raw data. So I'll copy this and paste it here. Right, now I'll test it. See, response is correct, and it's giving me 200, and the response is also correct. So this API is working fine. So that's how you test API on Postman manually. Sometimes you get the API documentation from developers or stakeholders, but sometimes you, even if you don't get it, just go here and you can capture the API request data from Chrome developer tools, right? So this is the correct login, and now if I can duplicate this and I can name this and if I want to test the incorrect one, this is not needed, so I'm removing this. I can just change the data, right? So password is invalid this time. The status was 422 unprocessable entity. So you can notice. Now there is a proxy. So this is how you test an API manually. You can test as many APIs as you want. Just keep adding these requests and then keep changing this data. And you can supply this password, username, and this endpoint in your staging variables. So if I want to improve this using environment variables, what I'll do is basically I'll set my basic right. So this is my base URL, and I will also take this to the environment variable. I'll name it username, name it password. And I'll update this file, close it, and I will replace these values here. Base URL, username, password. And if I hit it, see the M response. So that's how you so it will be very useful in automation also. So you don't provide anything hard coded in your request editor. Everything should be either on environment level or in collection level. Now the last thing functionality is your proxy. So you can enable proxy like this. Okay, now I'll set proxy in Firefox because I'm using Chrome for my default actions. So for this example, I'll use Firefox to set proxy. So the proxy port is 555. So I'll open Firefox. I'll open the Firefox proxy settings. Okay, see, I've already set it up. So once that is done, now if I visit any website, that data or that request is captured in Postman. Now I'll change some settings of proxy. So here I'll say add all these data in history. Okay, and also say that URL should contain test automacy. So I want to capture only test automacy request, and then method type I want to capture only post request. Okay, you can also supply that URL doesn't contain this. And if you want like different website to not use this, you can have multiple matcher check using OR operator, right? So now every new request which I make through Firefox should come in the history section, which is related to test automacy. So let's check that. Okay, so if I log in, that would be a post request. So I'll do a post request. Okay, so login was wrong, but we should see this request in Postman. See, so all the post requests are captured here. We only made two post requests, so profile and Ajax. So you can see this API. So this was my API, and if you see the body part, automatically username and password were captured here. Admin and password this. So that's how you can use Postman proxy also. That is it for this session. See you in the next session.